Welcome back to Sacred Arc, a podcast about life, loss, and the soul in between. I'm Kimberly, intuitive grief guide, death doula, licensed esthetician, and whether I wanted to be or not, a lifelong student of grief. In the last 2 seasons, we've talked about grief in a broader way. We've talked about what it is, how it forms, and how it can show up in our lives in ways we don't always recognize right away. We talked about childhood, about the environments we grew up in, the roles we took on, the ways we learned to adapt, and how those early experiences shape how we move through the world later. We talked about patterns, about the ways we respond, the ways we protect ourselves, the ways we connect or struggle to. And through all of that, grief has been there. Sometimes obvious, sometimes quiet, sometimes hidden inside things we didn't even realize were connected to it. And now, I want to come back to it, but in a different way. This season is going to look a little different because instead of talking about grief as a whole, we're going to start looking at the griefs themselves, the specific kinds of loss that people carry, the kinds of grief that don't always get talked about in depth or don't always get fully understood. We're going to talk about things like pet loss, losing a parent, losing a grandparent, child loss, and other forms of grief that don't always have clear space to be named. Because while grief connects all of us, the way it shows up can feel very different depending on what was lost, and sometimes these differences matter. Not because one loss is bigger than another, but because each one has its own shape, its own weight, its own way of living inside someone. And I want to say something here before we go any further. There is no hierarchy of grief. One loss is not more valid than another, even though the world sometimes treats it that way. Even though some losses are acknowledged more publicly or supported more visibly, grief itself doesn't work like that. Grief is not something that can be measured from the outside. It doesn't follow rules. It doesn't compare itself. It's experienced from the inside. It's shaped by love, by connection, by meaning, by what that person or that relationship represented in your life. And sometimes it's also shaped by things people don't see. The history, the complexity, the things that were said or never said, the things that were present or missing. So whatever your loss is, however it's shown up for you, even if it doesn't look like someone else's, it matters. And it deserves to be acknowledged without needing to be explained. One of the reasons I wanted to create this season is because I think a lot of people don't feel fully seen in their grief. They might recognize parts of it. They might hear something and think, yes, that actually feels familiar, but not fully, not completely, because their specific experience hasn't been named, or it hasn't been talked about in a way that feels accurate to them. When something isn't named, it can feel isolating. It can feel like maybe this isn't grief, maybe I'm overreacting, or I shouldn't feel like this, it shouldn't feel this heavy. And that's where people start to disconnect from their own experience. So this season is about naming those spaces, creating room for them, letting people hear something and think, that's it, that's what I've been feeling. Because sometimes just having language for something changes the way we carry it. And I also want to say this, some of these episodes may feel closer to home than others. Some may feel familiar. Some may feel heavy. Some may bring up things that you weren't expecting. And you don't have to move through all of it at once. You don't have to listen to everything in order. You don't have to push yourself through something that doesn't feel right in the moment. You can take breaks. You can pause. You can come back later. Or not at all. This isn't something you have to get through. It's something that's here to support you when it feels right for you. And I think that's important to say, because sometimes even listening to conversations about grief can be activating. And it's okay to honor that. As you listen to this season, you might find yourself in different places. There may be episodes where you hear your own story, your own experience, your own grief reflected back to you, and there may be others where you're hearing something that isn't your experience, but it helps you understand someone else's. And both of those things matter. Because grief isn't just something we carry individually, it also shapes how we show up for each other, how we support people, how we respond, how we hold space, or sometimes we even struggle to. And the more we understand the different ways grief shows up, the more capacity we have to meet each other with care. For me, this season is also extremely personal because grief isn't something I talk about from a distance. It's something I live with, something I've experienced in ways that have changed me, and something I continue to learn through over time. And I think that's very important to say. Understanding grief doesn't mean you're outside of it, doesn't mean you've moved past it, doesn't mean it's something you've figured out. It just means you're learning how to be with it, how to move with it, how to live alongside it in a way that feels a little more grounded. And that's an ongoing process, not something that happens once. So as we move into this season, we're going to take this one piece at a time, one experience at a time. And in the next episode, we're going to start with something that so many people have experienced, but often gets minimized: pet loss. And what it really feels like to lose something that wasn't just anything, but part of your daily life, your routine, your comfort, your sense of connection. Because that kind of loss is often felt deeply, even when it's not always recognized that way. I also want to open something up here. This season isn't just about the episodes that I've planned. It's also about creating space for real stories, real experiences, the kinds of conversations that don't always have a place to be shared. So if you're listening to this and something in you feels like you have a story that you want to share, whether that's about a specific kind of loss or your experience living with grief, you are always welcome to reach out. There may be space this season to bring in a few guests and to have conversations that expand beyond just my voice. Not in a way that feels forced, but in a way that feels aligned, honest, and safe. And even if sharing your story publicly isn't something that feels right for you, you're still welcome to reach out, to share, to connect. Because part of what I want this space to be is somewhere people don't feel like they have to carry everything alone. If you're here, whatever brought you here, I'm really glad that you are. The season isn't about having answers. It's not about fixing anything. It's about creating space for the parts of grief that don't always have language, for the experiences that don't always feel understood, for the things that feel heavy or quiet or complicated, and allowing them to exist without needing to change them. You don't have to carry it all at once. You can just be here. As we close today's episode, take a breath here, in through your nose and out through your mouth. Let your shoulders drop just a little. There's no rush. This has been Sacred Arc. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll meet you again in the space between.